or are they being abused the way, you know,
they've been abused?
They were abused, you know, during the industrial experiment. Because right now, if you look at almost every parastatal, there's some political people, you know, that are attached to those parastatals. There's abuse, contracts, giving of contracts. This is what killed the industrialization program. So the program, the point I'm trying to drive there is that have we actually detached and disentangled, you know, from that kind of mentality to ensure that, you know, even this IDC that we're talking about, is it not being abused? You know, or it's being abused. If this template of industrialization that made Africa felt industrialized is still there today, I mean, how do we expect to move forward? You know, because I'm trying to build that, you know, to give in proposals on how we should move forward. Now, I call it rigged democracy because, you know, after independence, the people, the Europeans, advised us on how we should go about industrializing. But because of tribal divisions, because of political systems, because of how things were happening, you know, the economy could not operate. That's why the companies were falling apart. You know, and, you know, came all these authoritarian rulers and all that kind, you know, dictators. They were born and stuff like that. So for the Europeans to actually find a way of continuing to do these things, they put a condition. Because now, every country in Africa now had to go back to the colonial and say, you know what, we're asking for some money. You know? And that's how they started, you know, to, giving conditions so that if you want to continue, you know, benefiting from our loans, you need to go to democracy and implement market reforms. Market principles and all that kind of thing. You know, so you can imagine, you know, that even independence happened at the watch of the imperialist. Democracy, it was a condition of the imperialist.
Correct.
You know? And then they started sponsoring, you know, their people, you know, people that they felt were friendly to their policies to continue. Because even these things that we're talking about, like, you know, let's own our means of production, talk about that. You know, other people are going to call them populist politics. In fact, the West media...
They'll tell you that you are now a communist.
You are now a communist or a populist. You are practicing populist politics because they're trying to instill fear in the people. Say, no, populism has got no place. But we are trying to call for the dismantling of systems that have perpetuated poverty in Africa.
Wonderful. I like that. There's a lot of dismantling and dismantling. I jumped. The other one is a history of our country and the formula for poverty perpetuation. I think along the way you are discussing this already.
Yeah, I can just briefly just touch it. So in chapter 5, I talk about the history of Zambia. Basically, it's a history that everyone knows. But I'm just trying to marry it to the whole African history. You know, how Africa is not different from how Zambia was impacted by colonialism. You know, because from chapter 1 to 4, you know, I talk about all these things and how actually these things had also a direct impact on Zambia, you know, the demarcation of Africa. The young people, I'm trying to also have the young people understand that, you know what, this country was not created by us. It was created by the colonialists. You know, that's the reason why you have Chewas this side, in Malawi, Mozambique, because they just demarcated this and said, you guys are going to be living together. You know, then I talk about the industrial experiment. I also talk about the coups, you know, because as a result of the authoritarian rule of the UNIP under President Kaunda, you know, it also motivated other coups to happen in Zambia, you know. Coup attempts, and then transition to democracy, you know, all the presidents, and, you know, a brief about, you know, what people thought about each president, you know, and all the way to now.
Quickly, what were your thoughts about all the presidents? Let's start with Dr. Kaunda.
Well, I like to excuse Dr. Kaunda. He comes from a very unique place in the sense that, you know, there were a lot of dynamics after independence. First, he took over an economy where a lot of his citizens were not educated.
Were excluded, yes.
You know what I mean? But Kaunda, you know, tried by all means. I think that's why you find that, Zambia actually, after, I think that was 1968 or 1969, under the material reforms where the government decided to take over all the mines so that we can have control of the mines. However, because independence was actually a condition, there were conditions to independence.
Yeah.
We had to pay back, it's like we were buying our companies, which were being abused and all that kind of thing.
No, because a picture has been painted that our freedom fighters fought their way to independence. But when you look at Macmillan's speech in Cape Town, the Prime Minister, Labour Prime Minister, or the Conservative Prime Minister in UK, gave a speech in Cape Town and promised, he had given another one in Cairo, the so-called window of change speech, where he says, no, we are giving up all these colonial territories, we are giving them up to indigenous. So it was their decision to give us
it was their decision,
back.
but there were conditions. We had to actually buy these mines. There was money that was paid. I think Andrew Sadan's 50 years, the first 50 years of Zambia, actually explains in detail on that dynamic, of thing. Yeah. So
there are a lot of interest about how we nationalize the mines. And like you are saying, a bond was issued, traded in London and in Osaka, and we had to pay something like $250 million. This country actually lost, he explains in detail how the fraud literally occurred in favor of Lonro. So it wasn't just taking over without a cost to us.
It was a cost.
And imagine if the entire Tazara around that time cost $450 million, how much is that $250 million we lost? These are billions of dollars now in monetary terms.
So for Dr. Kaunda, one of the, unlike other African, because if you look at a number of other African countries, after independence, they went to war. There was, there was the Biafra war in Nigeria, where, there was just serious divisions in Nigeria. The country was literally divided into 3 regions, based on religion and, ethnic divisions. You have, the dynamics that happened in Sudan. Sudan divisions started immediately after independence. Between the Muslims and the Christians. The same with Chad. And many other countries. And Rwanda.
Rwanda and Burundi.
Because, for Rwanda, people think that, the genocide that happened in 1994 was the first one.
There was an earlier one.
There was an earlier one. That's the reason why you find that people like Paul Kagame were born in Uganda. Because they went into exile early on when they were very young. So...
and he was... most of his ministers and his colleagues were actually ministers in Uganda. He was head of the intelligence in Uganda.
They were working in the Uganda military and all that kind of thing. So, but for Zambia, the difference is that, Kaunda tried, to unite this country with the One Zambia, One Nation motto. There was not serious, tribal divisions that, culminated into wars, unlike other African countries. And that is, was a dynamic that was important. Because unity...
UNIP leaders use the excuse of the one-party state as actually a strength, because our multi-party state at the time, was ethnically divided. UNIP was mostly in north, north and east, while ANC had now gone to the south. And those divisions, to heal them, a one-party state was forced on us, where there was only one government, and everyone else then promoted to be part of the, forced to be part of the government. And the One Zambia, One Nation motto is another which really helped to unite the country. I don't know to what extent, but there was a national project to unite the country as a project.
But also, you must also understand that the one-party state, it was not just in Zambia as well. It was used by almost all African countries, to actually try to pretend that, we don't want national unity. But in actual sense, it was a way for most African leaders, to control and, cement their hold to power. That's the reason why most of these guys, they stayed for many years.
Yeah.
And, others obviously were kicked through coups, others died and all that kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah, so so that is my thinking about them.
You are very keen on mindset dismantling. And then you're calling for new and real African renaissance. Is there a fourth African renaissance? Why do you call this one real, new and real African renaissance on mindset dismantling?
Yeah. So just a quick one on dynamics.
Yes.
The dynamics now, after talking about the history, I'm trying to say, what, we're being abused, we're being exploited even now. Because I'm trying to give an example to say that if we don't run our means of production, we should forget about eradicating poverty. That's what I'm talking about in the dynamics. In there, I create a small narrative where I'm using 30% as, income tax payable by companies in Africa, across Africa. Then I say, look, how are we being exploited? We're being exploited in the sense that if, because our economy is largely foreign owned. A lot of companies that operate in Zambia, even from the smallest things, are foreign owned. Even in Africa, in almost all African countries, whether they're from China, whether from Turkey, or whether from the US or Europe. Now, if you look at that dynamic of poverty perpetuation, it is a fact that, the World Bank and the IMF has created a situation where we should continue to borrow money. Because if you look at that formula, it will tell you that there's no chance. That
the last 60 years, IMF and World Bank have made Africa a permanent presence and permanent client. They've never seemed to have lifted anyone out of poverty.
So I'm questioning.
Despite the billions of dollars, in fact, they're in trillions that have been given to Africa the last 60 years.
So I'm trying to question the fact that have they not known why poverty is being perpetuated in Africa? Because truth be told, they know. So if you look at the history and you read that chapter, you understand that, these guys have been playing on us. So if 30% is income tax payable by all the companies around the world, basically, I use it as around the world.
Yeah.
It means that in Africa, 30% is going to the government, 70% is repatriated.
Unfortunately, because they are foreign-owned
companies. Now, we don't, in Africa, we wait, we have foreign companies. But if you go to America, they've got indigenous companies. So 30% goes to the government, and they invest it in the American economy. 70% is kept by the indigenous company, and is reinvested in the economy.
Yeah, yeah.
Then there's another 70% that comes in through profit repatriation from, poor countries. So now, if you put the ratio there, you find that, developed countries are earning 17 to 3. Africa is at 3%. Africa is at 30%, because the only money they rely on is what?
The 30%.
30%. The developed countries, they get the profits they're getting from poor countries, plus what they have within themselves is 170%. You understand?
Yes.
So now, if you look at this ratio, which is 17 to 3, you find that there is no chance in this world that Africa can actually get out of poverty unless we own our means of production. That is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Now, part of that topic talks about, brings it home to say, look, how has President HH done it? In terms of, trying to reverse this formula. Does he understand it? So if you look at the trips he has made to go and look for investors across the world, it means that he is perpetuating that formula.
Speak to the formula. What formula is that?
Sorry?
What formula is that? Speak to this formula for poverty perpetuation.
It's a formula that I created myself. I call it, the formula of poverty perpetuation, where I use a narrative of 30% as income tax payable by companies around the world. So in Africa, in Zambia, for example, the fact that the economy is owned by foreigners, the only money that remains in this country is 30%. 70% is what? Repatriated.
Yeah.
Now, we as Zambians and Africans at large, we don't own companies outside here. We don't expect profits to come from China or America. The only money that remains, to deal with social services is the 30%. Now, for America, Europe, China, apart from the 30% they get from their own companies, and the 70%, which is invested by their company, because those are indigenous companies, they will invest those profits within themselves.
Yeah.
They have also exported profits where they're getting the other 70% from poor countries. So now when you add 30% indigenous, for the government in the developed countries, you add 70% for the indigenous companies there, and the 70% which is repatriated from poor countries, the total is 170%.
I see. Now, I wanted you to speak to that formula.
So what remains for African countries like Zambia is just 30%.
30%.
So now,
totally
do you
inadequate.
think that 30% is enough to take care of, a lot of these things?
I laugh at our national budget. No one has even bothered to restructure our budget. The template remains, like you are saying, the same.
It's the same template.
Look, you have a national budget. It doesn't matter who is reading it. 50% will go to paying civil servants, who are about 250,000 workers. 50% of your money will go to that, paying those wages in public service. 20-25% will go to running of government, international trips, and just the fuels and administrative cost of running government. By the time you have anything, first, and another one, big one, 20% to your debt service, you only have probably just 10% to distribute to national development. And it's thinly distributed. That's why you find one simple road, 200 kilometers, will take 7 years.
Yes.
Because there's no money. They have to thinly spread. And
this is just the 30%. That's what I'm trying to say, the dynamics. It's a small money. It's not enough to build roads.
No.
It's not enough to buy fertilizers. That's why you find that nowadays, people are sharing fertilizers in what they call mameda. Because there's not enough money. Even this thing that President HH is saying, no, we're going to make sure that Zambia becomes an irrigation place. With which money? Because all this money is repatriated. We're not generating enough money.
Look at the mining sector. Our annual exports are between $5 to $7 billion every year for the last 60 years. How much do our governments get? Between $300 and $1 billion if you have got favorable rates. And if it's in the last 30 years where the mines have been refusing to pay taxes, you barely get nothing from the mining sector. Yet, you have exports of up to $5 to $7 billion a year.
So that is that one. I'm calling for dismantling of this system, and I'm actually saying let's look at in the eyes of the Americans, the Europeans, the Chinese. Are they sure they are not aware about this poverty perpetuation formula? They don't know why Africa is poor, because this is why it is poor. Is the World Bank and the IMF. Let's look in the face of the World Bank and the IMF. Are they sure they don't know why there is poverty in Africa? Because they have felt. I give an example. For example, in Haiti, there's instability there. There's the budget of the U.S. To try and combat instability there. They're spending about $300 million. Have these guys ever said, you know what? Here's the $300 million. You invest it in your own indigenous companies in the mining sector. They have not.
Correct.
They don't want us to run our means of production.
No, I think that's why the precursor should be market reforms. They want you to run a liberal economy without regulation. They want their companies, when they are here, their companies can repatriate all their profits. Their companies can repatriate everything else. I remember the argument about South African Airways when the late minister Pravin Gordhan came in. He said these big companies, Eskom, South African Airways, they all have to go. He says they have to be dismantled and left to the private sector. He says they just post losses. He gave an example of South African Airways, which wasn't giving profit. But there are others that says you can let South African Airways run at a loss, but it brings you 20 million tourists every year. And you can't trust that the private sector will do the same. And the hub, Johannesburg as a hub, will die. It will go to Nairobi, it will go to Dubai, it will go to Addis Ababa if you do not literally subsidize African Airways.
Yeah.
So IMF and World Bank will say ZESCO is making losses and bundle it and sell it.
Yeah.
For them, they look at it that way. They don't look at national development and how national development can be fostered. So I like your approach to, first, our mindset we need to recognize.
Yeah, that's what, so just quickly on the mindset. So in the mindset, after putting all this information, I think a lot of people want to motivate Africans, say, no, you should think in this way. You should think in this. It's a system. So now, the mindset I'm calling for is for the Africans, people, to say, guys, let's change the mindset. We can actually industrialize. This is where we're coming from. They've been lying to us. This is the economic system that they have perpetuated. So the only way, that's why I even quote, the Bible. That's John 1, John, is it 8 verse 32, where it says, you will know the truth. And the truth shall set you free. So the best way to actually dismantle the mindset so that it can start thinking right is to tell the truth of what has been happening so that Africans can start thinking in a certain direction. Because this mindset of defeat, like the first quote, I want to read the first quote.
Yes, please.
From Steve Biko, where it says that the type of black man we have today has lost his manhood, reduced to an obliging shell. He looks with awe at the white power structure and accepts what he regards as the inevitable position. All in all, the black man has become a shell, a shadow of a man, completely defeated, drowning in his own misery, a slave, an ox bearing the yoke of oppression with sheepish timidity. Then he suggests what we needed to do. What we needed was a massive effort to reverse the negative image that blacks held of themselves and to replace it with a more positive identity. Black oppression was first and foremost a psychological problem. It could be countered by promoting black awareness, black pride, black capabilities, and black achievement. So, you see, the colonial system...
The biggest industry, almost informal industry in our country, beauty products. We are importing Brazilian hair, Indian hair at great cost.
Yeah.
The bleaching creams is because our image as Africans is distorted. We don't know who we are.
Yes, we are defeated.
We are defeated already.
We are in this inevitable position.
Yes.
That's what Steve Biko was trying to say. To say, you know what, the other challenge of our mindset is that, colonialism defeated us because black people were treated with disdain. They were treated as an inferior race. This is how we were treated. That's why, black people were not allowed to do proper things. That's why, they were not staying in good neighborhoods. There were white areas, and then there was black areas where they were putting these small houses, It is a system that was created, which has been defeated. And said,
just this morning, and sorry to mention both characters, I was watching an old video from 2019 between my dear brother, Chilufya Tayali, and Kaseva Mashila. They were having a political argument. It's an old video, but it's from 2019. Now, Chilufya Tayali was accusing Kaseva Mashila of being dirty because he keeps a beard and a lot of hair.
Yeah.
Now, what struck me, especially because I was reading your book, was how much damaged we are. So by keeping hair, being an African and keeping your beard, we actually call it dirty. Can you imagine? If our women are keeping kinky hair, we call it dirty. It has to be straightened. It has to be... So sorry to Tayali and Kaseva Mashila to give an example, but that's part of the mindset.
That is part of the mindset. We were part of the system, the education system. The religious system was to keep us defeated, to look at the white people as superior human beings.
Oh, yeah. Our religion was declared satanic. Our religions were declared demonic. Our medicine and indigenous knowledge, we used to heal ourselves, was all of a sudden African medicine became demonic and no longer attractive. Yet the modern medicine and pharmaceutical company rely on the primary source, which our parents had before we start.
Exactly. So what has happened is that even the education system has not focused on dealing with these, colonial systems, psychological issues. We've grown up. Say, let's own our minds. Can we do what the white man can do?
We can't run our minds.
That's why I say in the introduction, I talk about, black people have gone, to work in other areas which have given the opportunity and have excelled even better than the so-called white people.
Yeah.
You get the point, And I think I was listening to Tyrese Gibson where he was talking, say that, the problem we have as black people is that we're not united. These white people, they're going to use us. If you look at, the NBA, for example, almost everyone who plays there is a black person. But who makes the money?
Yes, the white people.
The people that are musicians, most of them are black people. But the people who make the money, it's the white people. It's a system. That was
You're fighting
created.
a system.
We are fighting a system, and that's why we are saying economic system dismantling. We need to dismantle that system. And in chapter 7, we're talking about, it starts from the mindset. And the best way to dismantle this system is to educate, the black person. We need to have a group, not just Andyford Banda alone, but a group of Zambians, a group of Africans who can take up this, job of telling the history the way it is, so that people can learn and say, because if you're not a Christian and you don't know about Jesus Christ and God, you are ignorant. But the moment you learn, you say, oh, God is amazing. So this is how life should be. So when you learn these things, you open up your mind.
Even the picture of Jesus Christ is distorted. We know Jesus was not white, but they give us a picture of both Mary and Jesus as white when they were not white. They probably looked more African than they are white. But
so in
it's part of the mindset.
And then I just talk about a bit of, as I try to apply.
I loved your next chapter, the governance system, because you came home.
Yeah.
You descended to Zambia.
Yeah.
Speak about it. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with
so in the governance systems, I was trying to say, this is what perpetuates, wrong systems.
Yeah.
I was trying to build context about why we absorb wrong system, and I was giving local examples. When people get into power, they promise, we're going to be a new Dawn government. But
when there's nothing new about that.
When they're in power, the new Dawn government, you can't even see it anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay? And then they start, making, constitutional amendments. And I give an example of the Patriotic Front and how they tried to actually manipulate the Constitution through the Bill 10. And I give a number of examples of a certain constitutional amendments, that the PF were trying to do to benefit them and to promote a patronage system. Okay? And that constitutional amendment did not work out. One of the things that I would actually advise our PF colleagues to buy the book so that, they can maybe pick one or two things, from the mistakes that they were making, and why these things did not work out for them. Now, on top of that, there were other laws that were created by the PF. And obviously, these laws were not friendly to the people, such as the Cyber Security Act. So now, if you read that, now you need to pay attention how, things now are being sustained. Now, when the cybersecurity, bill was enacted, the president of Zambia, current president, who was now in the opposition, condemned it to say that the first thing I'm going to do when I become president, I will repeal this law. The information minister also discussed to say the first priority for President HH is to repeal, the Cybersecurity Act. 3 years down the line, they're enjoying the law. They're actually using it more against their opponents. The same thing that they condemned. So you can see how these things are sustained. When the Cybersecurity Act was actually enacted, the current Minister of Information, Cornelius Mwetwa, condemned it and said, people only had social media to actually express themselves. Now they have enacted this law which curtails, the freedoms of the people. Because they want people to focus on listening to ZNBC, which gives them a menu of lies. If you look at ZNBC today, is it different from the PF days? Sustaining systems, wrong governance systems. On top of that, I give an example on when they were trying to actually regulate podcasts, motivated by one Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba.
Thank you for the inclusion. Although it's generally podcast, you didn't name me, I noticed that. But everyone can tell what it was.
Yeah. Because
no,
I was quoting.
We have seen both the Minister of Information and his permanent secretary even say they'll follow administrators in WhatsApp groups. That will be held liable, that they'll be prosecuted. We've heard how the law is being applied on all of us who've been charged and arrested. They've even brought something from the National Archives, the law on sedition. That law hasn't been used, I think, as far back as 1968. It's an old archaic law.
It is
very
a colonial,
retributive. It's a colonial law.
Yeah.
But they've gotten it from the graveyard of laws,
and they're using
it against all of us.
Yeah.
Everything we are saying is inciting. Everything we are saying is seditious. They can declare any material as seditious. Very, very dangerous for democracy, and I like that part.
So that is what we're trying to say there when we talk about how governments have tried to manipulate parliament. First of all, when they were the peak, you can see that if you look at, I think I mentioned a bit of how Ahmed Sekou Toure was speaking parliamentarians, because they want people who are in parliament to be loyal to them, to be, it's a rubber stamp parliament, so that they can enact laws, that support, their hegemony and all that kind of thing, And then in addition to that, they actually, if they don't have the numbers, they actually now try to destabilize the opposition. To get so I give an example of, what was happening and what's been happening in the Patriotic Front.
Correct.
Where, I was giving a narrative to say this is what most people thought, to say, what, the government was involved in the destabilizing of, the Patriotic Front. Then I give examples of events that followed, just to show that, what, there's a good chance that, the engineers of that confusion were the people in government. I look at, I quote people like my friend Sishua, why he questioned, people, judges that were allocated those cases, and all that kind of thing. Then I also talk about, how institutions are manipulated, where you have people that maybe are tribesmate or in a tribal alliance, how they're given key government positions, such as the Minister of Home Affairs, Electoral Commission of Zambia.
It's the strongest I've seen you. You've condemned tribalism, and the allocation of key appointments made to key positions in this country. Yeah,
because it's an exploitative system that is there just to perpetuate certain interest, just like it was in colonialism.
Times, correct.
You get the point. So that is what I'm trying to say. But I also advise the people in government, because I quote, for example, the public protector was quoted at some point where, in fact, Shishua's article talks about why is that these people are from this tribal line, and then there was also accusation about people being placed on, forced leave, from certain region and stuff like that. And the public protector, came up.
Confirmed.
Said that, what?
Actually, we're investigating this.
We're investigating, but it's not on, obviously it's not on tribe and what. But what I'm trying to say that this discussion was there. So I try to advise, the government, to say, this thing is archaic. Look at your results. I put the results there, and how they were supported from across
the country.
Meaning that, this thing about, if anything like this has happened, then it's a waste of time, because people have moved on. They have moved on from the arbitrary demarcation of Africa, where you need to support people from this group and do things the right way. Because the young people, who are the majority right now, all they want is opportunity. And these are the people that stand up to vote.
Yeah.
And when people see that things are not working out, they start, coming up with amendments. Let's come up with electoral reforms. Let's come up with constitutional reforms. exactly what's happening.
I
finished this book in March, editing and all that kind of thing. I think March, April, early, that. And I've not done a lot
before the new developments emerged.
Before the new developments
emerged. But you were prophetic in nature.
So the system I describe, it's like it's happening. There's rumors of the 9 MPs, being, it's instigated because, the ruling party wants numbers, either to lift the immunity of the former president, to pass, constitutional amendments or electoral reforms and all that kind of thing. And these are serious things, This
serious.
is what, weakens our institutions. And like I said earlier, an economy cannot operate in isolation. Not because, you're an economist. No, you can. The systems, the governance system has to work. The politics have to work, and this cannot work, based on tribalism, nepotism, or corruption, or a patronage system, you can call it.
Oh, yeah. Now, let me rush you. First of all, there have been constitutional proposals from the President's last address to Parliament and subsequent development by the Speaker, where she has proposed that Parliament may amend the Constitution by targeting non-discriminatory clauses. And then we've seen some illegalities at the Electoral Commission of Zambia, where the Electoral Reform Technical Committee was appointed by Madam Mwangala Zalumis, which in itself is an illegality. I don't think she has powers to set up any body that should, or any committee that should look at the review of our laws and the Constitution in relation to elections. Those are very serious worries. And of course, like you said, when you're discussing systems, because you remain that principle, it is not difficult to predict that this will happen.
Yes, that is what I was trying. That's why I say I was trying to build context and perspective. Because first of all, for the economic things that I've touched, we can look at them on surface areas. Because these are details issues. We can look at them surface. People must buy the book and read. But the point that you're trying to drive is that the perspective and context I was trying to build was for people to predict and to understand, why is the government acting in this way?
It's doing.
And these are systems. A system is a system. And a system is not open-ended. It's a system which is structured like this. So the structure comes from colonialism, from the behavior of African leaders, So I want someone to say, okay, why are they talking about, electoral reforms? Is it because we're going towards election? Why didn't they talk about electoral reforms in the first year of being in power? Why are they talking about? Why have they increasingly talking about constitutional reforms? Do they want to do another butane on the people of Zambia? So when you look at the history of Africa, you understand that the UPND, for example, and we're not here to discuss the UPND, we're discussing the book, but the reason why the UPND are mentioned is to build context, because they're in government. We want the people to understand whether the way things are happening in the country. And the people who are running the country, the UPND. So there's no way we can write build context without mentioning them. So we want people to know whether the way things are happening in the country. Are we on the right trajectory or are we not? Are people who are in charge of government building confidence in the way the governance system is working? Are they building confidence in the political systems? Are they building confidence in the economic systems? And also, that is basically what we're trying to do, in building that context.
No, very, very important.
But just as a matter of
combine these two.
So just as a matter of warning to say that, look, let's not take these electoral reforms or constitutional reforms lightly. We need to be alert. And I think I've been posting on my Twitter for a long time, of a lot of things, when the other MPs, there was a time they were declared,
it's
vacant. I said, be alert. There was a talk of constitutional reforms, and the government came back and said, no, we're not planning constitutional reforms. But the constitutional reforms are still happening. Be alert. They'll tell you, no, we are not. We're just dealing with non-contentious clauses. Be alert. They want to put in something there. Something there. We have rumors of registrations of voters being happening in strongholds of the so-called ruling party. Be alert. So this is very important. Now,
so thank you very much.
So after describing the systems, and how it impacts or the impact of these systems. Now, I took the mining sector and the dynamics around the mining sector. For example, energy transition, that is coming, and how we can leverage that, to actually position ourselves to own the mines. I look at the structure of the current mining sector. We don't own nothing, meaning that abusive structure is still present in our time. And that cannot stop us from, from reversing the escalating poverty. Then I come to the agriculture sector. I look at, the resources that we have and why we should not be hungry. Because we have the resources. We need to build structures. We need to train the farmers. We need to give them extension services to ensure that, the farmers are producing. And we need to understand to say that the reason why 78% of the people in our country are poor is because this was a colonial distortion. We have been forced to focus on the mining sector, whereas the mining sector, as we speak, is not employing as many people as possible. As many people because of technology improvement. Rumwana Copper Mines, for example, is actually investing $2 billion, and they only employ about 600 to 800 permanent workers. Now, what is the benefit of employing 800 for a $2 billion investment? And then 60% of Zambians, they actually derive their livelihood from agriculture. And then we are abandoning agriculture. The poverty levels, in rural areas where agriculture is the mainstay is going up because we want to say no mining, revival. There is no economic revival without looking at the agriculture sector, where the majority of the people derive their livelihood. There is no economic revival. That is not possible. 60% of Zambia's income is from the agriculture sector. If we want to see a revival, it's not just us owning the mines. It's one part. We need to ensure that the agriculture sector is working. I give an example of how exploitative, the current system of land is coming from colonial times, where the white people are the only ones privileged to do what? To own land. We need to have discussions with our traditional leaders and say, we're perpetuating poverty. We're sustaining systems that are not helping us. You see, if you look at commercial farmers, most of them are white people. They're able to walk into the bank because they've got land and they've got a title. A lot of our people who are in the rural areas, they don't have titles. Even if a financial institution wants to help them, what is the collateral? So just us, having discussions with the traditional leaders and say, Amfumu, let's do this and this, so that we help our country and help our people. Right now, there's climate change. People must prepare for that, and to prepare for that, we need to build systems that don't have to wait for the government. Drip irrigation government. No. We need to build an economy that operates independent of the government. The government must focus on policy. Let the systems operate on their own. Let's generate revenue and incomes without government involvement at every level. I call for the dismantling of the agriculture sector so that there's a little, hand in the government, in that sector. But we have sustained that political system. We fear to discuss these things openly with traditional leaders about, land issues, because we say, no, if we talk to our traditional leaders, they will tell people not to vote for us because we're trying to get their power of, the land issue, It doesn't, reduce the powers of the, of the traditional leaders. At the end of the day, all land is vested in the president. You get the point. So now we talk to the financial services sector, which is the longest chapter because it touches on entrepreneurship and
I was going to start to after we discussed raw materials and food, agriculture, and land. I said you have literally passion for the financial service sector. And you present it as one of the key solutions to the current crisis. Just explain.
The financial services sector is very critical, to the development of this country. It has to be robust and it has to be responsive to the needs of the country. As we speak today, the financial services sector is not responsive, to the needs of this country. That's the reason why you have a lot of foreigners coming to this country to sell second-hand vehicles, to set up block-making companies, because they come with capital. That's why you see companies like Ulendo being taken out of business by a highly capitalized, Russian Nyango company, because our financial services sector is not operating. 90% or 80%.
How did we let Young out of business,
Ulendo,
and allow a Russian company take over?
Because we're not protecting ourselves. We've let it open.
How did we let an indigenous, very enterprising company like Zona, whose business was very pioneering, taken over by foreign mobile companies?
So what we need to do is that we need to start protecting our own. Because yes, Zambian companies are struggling. You know, the profits are thin. The opportunities are small because there's so much competition from highly capitalized foreign companies. So now, if, for example, a company that sells second-hand vehicles along Kafua Road buys, has a lot of capital and they've got 20 vehicles and they reduce the price, where is someone going to go to buy a car? They'll go in Kafua Road, from those, people from Asia. And they'll leave our brothers who are here at Kamwala and other places. So, because those guys are highly capitalized. But if we say no second-hand vehicle must be sold by a foreigner, it means the competition is set up for our own people. Even with a little capital, but the money stays here. Then the financial services sector can respond because the income levels have gone up. Because there's more business, for the second-hand car dealers. This is what we should do, with block making. If we restrict the making of blocks to Zambians, the financial services sector will respond because there's business for block making anyway. Whether this is Turkish, they go to Istanbul or not, that business is going to be there. The competition has to be let for the Zambian. It is the same with Ulendo. It is something that we're able to do. We should not have let it be done. We should not have left competition by a highly capitalized foreign company. So what we need to do to increase and protect our SMEs is to start protecting them.
So will we not be promoting illiberal policies which IMF and World Bank will not allow? They will say you are restricting the market.
First
and the market
all,
is liberalized.
Why should we have liberal policies that are killing us? Why should we have to use common sense now? To hell with liberal policies if they're not working for the country. We have to build systems that work for us. It's the same with the banking sector. The banking sector is dictated by international laws. There's what is it called? The Basel Capital Accord. The Basel Capital Accord is what regulates our bank here. It protects capital for the banks because the profits have to be repatriated. It's a colonial system. It does not respond, to the needs of the current, of our country. It just serves multinationals and the government, because with the government you can't lose money. Banks, even during COVID, according to the PwC report, they made insane profits.
Super profits. Than any other year. When the economy had collapsed.
When the economy had collapsed, because you know what? Their company, their customers are multinationals and the government. They continued. Like you said earlier when we talked about the war, the raw materials, even under COVID, had to continue moving. So the banks are set up just to service, the interest of this colonial structure.
How do we make a financial inclusion a real policy? It appears to be just token in nature and just appears like we're just ticking a box, but we're actually not promoting financial inclusion for our people.
In defense of the banks, it's not just their responsibility alone. It is also the responsibility of government policy. The government has failed to build policies that can actually help, the bank respond. On one hand, in as much as the focus is just on giving these multinational companies, the government has failed to build policies that would stimulate the economy. Because the government focuses on, because of the patronage system that we're used to, let's borrow money from the banks and give it to Citizen Economic Empowerment Commission, and then they give out loans. And the people that get these loans are political affiliates, tribesmates, based on nepotism, not based on competence.
No.
Okay? Now, also the Citizen Economic Empowerment Commission, how much money can it give? It can't give enough money. So what we need to do is that we should not actually borrow money from the banks to give to Citizen Economic Empowerment Commission. We should let the banking system work. Citizen Economic Empowerment Commission.
I saw a good value chain in South Africa where multinationals are obliged by law, by tax laws, that they have to spend 3 to 5% by identifying and supporting some small and medium enterprises.
That is,
as they are filing their tax report, they should demonstrate that they supported, either in their business, in their procurement, a small and medium enterprise. It's law.
That is what I'm talking about in that chapter. In Asia, banks were actually mandated to actually give at least 20% of their loans to small and medium enterprises. So that
as a policy.
Okay. Now, when we set up those laws and we don't also stimulate the economy, it means that we're putting the banks in a fix. So we need to put laws that will stimulate the economy, and the clear laws are laws that actually protect.
You can actually take two approaches. Look at China. China promoted state capitalism, where they built these giant state-owned enterprises, then that owned the economy together with foreign entities. Or you can go the India way, where you support small and medium enterprises, and the entire economy is mostly owned by small and medium enterprises.
If you look at the history of Africa, the China structure can't work.
Yeah.
We cannot.
The Indian model
would work
because
of tribalism. Because these are impacts of the arbitrary demarcation of Africa. There's always that favoritism. So now, when you put things in the hands of government, that's why we don't support. The reindustrialization must not be in the hands of government. Government, IDC must just own a bit of shares in a number of these companies, but the private sector must be the drivers of these things. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this CMIH owns a bit of shares in Copperbelt Energy Corporation.
Yeah.
But you can see the professionalism of CEC in the way they do things, their profit making and all that kind of thing. That is the structure we should pick. We're not saying government should not have, a stake.
You have several times spoken about local enterprises to demystify that they fail, that they can't run professionally, and you've used CEC as an example.
Yeah, because CEC is a very professional run company. Because why I like to use Copperbelt Energy Corporation is because CEC and I compare ZESCO and CEC. It's easy to compare these two. If you look at ZESCO, of course there's the issue of tariffs, but there's the issue of abuse, nepotism, and corruption. There's a bloated workforce. You don't find those things in a private company. So now people say, no, we can't run our own. No, the problem we have is that we want the government to be in charge of everything. When you let the government be in charge of everything, that's why you have what they call praise singers. Because you have to sing praises to the government for you to get some bread, an opportunity. Okay? Now, that is a system that we cannot promote. We need to promote a system where professionalism takes precedence over, political affiliation. Okay? So anyway, the banking and financial sector it talks about how the banks, it's a very dynamic topic, and the reforms that, we need to actually bring reforms. We also need to promote the ownership of the banking and financial sector to the local people. We cannot allow 6 years after independence where we don't have a bank that is owned by Zambians. We cannot compare. Say, no, we failed to run Invest Trust. We failed to run.
There was a lot of pain expressed when Invest Trust was allowed to go down. I think it wasn't supposed to go down. It could have been helped. It required capital. ZCMIH as owners of up to 72% could have provided that support. And this is to go more to the concept of a local bank.
But it's more than that. The problem we have, Ambassador, is that there's abuse. As long as it's a government thing, there's some level of entitlement to abuse it. No, I need a loan. Or minister, what? Or colonial. So what we need to promote.
Aren't you, before you provide the answer, aren't you defeating your own proposals that we need to provide support for local entities.
Private.
Let me give an example. I had challenges, when I was permanent secretary, and I was always warned by my technocrats. No, you can't give a local company. They will not dig the boreholes. The Chinese will dig the boreholes. When I went to stakeholders, the chiefs, for example, traditional authorities, they would warn Mwamba, wikaleta musebo wa kupelo mwina Zambia kuno. Upela ma Chinese. Because the Chinese will build the road. Then I had the area MPs, who also were very, very annoyed. In fact, there were 2 projects that we had given for water projects, one in Chinsali, one in Nakonde, one in Impulungu, and one in Kaputa. I had the biggest resistance to the water project in Kaputa. Why? Because it was given to a local and indigenous person. So there is this pessimism against local contractors that, number 1, they are not serious. Number 2, they will not do the work. Number 3, they will just use the money to buy cars for girlfriends and all.
So let me explain that.
Yeah.
Yes. You see, when it comes to expel the government, I explained that in Mindset Dismantling.
Yeah.
To say that the challenge you have is that when PAC forms government in 2026, we start giving road contracts to political party cadres who have got no business in building roads when they are actually professionals, professional engineering company. For example, Ngandu Consulting and others that can actually
whose business is exactly to do that. But the problem is that for Abel Ngandu to get a contract, he must be a political party cadre. So a political party cadre gets a contract that, they don't have business to do with road construction. They don't have business to do with borehole construction. Kuliko katenda kale so kwai. Tamaishi bako yobo munga bomba na bena mchiteko drama boss. That is where the problem is. So we need to change the mindset. We need to build a government system that awards the best. Then we're not going to have these problems. But also on the flip side, how much capacity have we built in Zambians compared to the Chinese? Yeah.
We need to have capacity building. And that's the reason why for us we think the Citizen Economic Empowerment Commission giving out loans is a missed call. They need to focus on capacity building, structuring companies, helping companies to be structured. Because when you go to a bank and you want a loan and you're not structured, you don't have records, you don't understand what you're talking about, they won't give you the money. So the Citizen Economic Empowerment Commission should be a capacity building department. That's its empowerment. It should not even be at that road. We should have classes. Of course, the Citizen Economic Empowerment Act talks about them working with TVETA. They should be very active in building capacity, so that by the time that these people they are said, okay, now you can go to the bank and ask, or now you can go to a private company that is in partnership with the Citizen Economic Empowerment to get a contract. They should have confidence that, we're giving a contract to people that understand what they're doing. Then they go to the bank. So we need to have that value chain. So the patronage system is a reason why,
there's no faith in local contractors.
That is what has killed, the faith in local contractors. But for private companies that fail to deliver, the other part is lack of capacity building. These people don't have the tools. They have not been given proper training and all that kind of thing. And the last part is that it's okay for people to fail. Let them fail. That's how we're going to learn as a country. So we should not just be perfect and say, no, let's just begin with the Chinese because what? Let's also start failing. Because without failing, we're not going to learn.
Yeah.
If we're just going to be aiming for perfection, we're not going to learn. That's why I give in Mindset Dismantling to change that mindset. They should know that in Silicon Valley, 90% of companies, of startups, they fail. Only 10% succeed. But you never hear it saying that, no, because 90% of startups fail in America, say, America is a place where, startups fail. But what have this 10% done to build the American economy? This is where we find the SpaceX, the Teslas, the Apple. They're in the 10% bracket. So imagine if we've been graduating 10% from 1964 up to now. But now, in this country, when you fail, tongues will go wagging. Oh, bale munakwati kuti baba businessman. But their area is just ukubomba. You see how he's suffering because he was trying to do entrepreneurship. This is where we learn about resilience. To be resilient in any undertaking that you're doing. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
So now to conclude,
you spend some time on the energy sector, and you argue that it's a fuel of the economy.
Yes.
Just briefly speak to that.
So on the energy sector, we're basically talking about the dynamics and making people understand, the context of where we are.
Why do we have load shedding?
It's because we have failed to put in the right policies from the word go.
What should be the right policies?
We should have put cost reflective, because we don't produce, equipment that produces electricity in this country.
We have hydro, which should be the cheapest in the world.
But the tariffs are still low. This is a known thing by everyone. The tariffs are low, and we have refused to put cost reflective tariffs for a long time. And that's why, in 2015, we had serious load shedding under the Patriotic Front. But between 2015 and now, how many alternative energy sources, power stations have been built? Almost zero, apart from Copper Belt Energy Corporation, because they are able to do that. They on their own transmission lines. They've got the other customers in the Congo who can pay them a premium. Do you understand? So I'm trying...
just for the record, there were 2 solar companies that were built in Gonya and Bangweulu, but they just contribute about 190 megawatts.
Yeah, I know those ones under IDC.
Yes.
But we're talking about investment. Those are being subsidized. And subsidies is one of the reasons why the African economy is collapsed. And I tried to say that, the cheap thing mentality of Africans comes from the white minority privilege, to say, okay, when we get independence, you're going to get cheap things, and that is what caused, the issue of energy crisis, because we don't want to give cost-reflective tariffs, because our focus has been on giving cheap things from the independence mentality instead of raising incomes. So I argue to say that, yes, majority, 60% of the people are poor, and they cannot afford electricity, because we have an economic system that does not help them to afford, other services like electricity. That's the reason why 78% of the rural population is poor, and the electricity penetration there is at 11%. So if we could raise the incomes there, then even the electricity penetration, even through solar, is going to increase. So it's about income levels. Yeah. That is what we need to focus on. Then we can afford, if we can afford the electricity and make sure there's cost-reflective tariffs, then we can have alternative energy sources. Then I also try to build context about the drivers that drives this, energy things. Yeah. Because we don't want people to come tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm going to give you cheap fuel. You're going to give cheap fuel. Do you produce fuel in this country? Because fuel prices are dictated by international oil prices and the exchange rate. Now, again, you cannot wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to, when I'm sown in, then the kwacha is going to appreciate. What fundamentals? There are perennial fundamentals that have contributed to the depreciation of the kwacha. Perennial fundamentals for a long time, which have caused, the same economic system has caused, the perennial depreciation of the kwacha. So now, if you're sown in at 10 and 14 hours, you're president, how do you work out those fundamentals so that, the kwacha can appreciate?
Yeah.
So meaning that, in as much as we politicians are accused of not delivering what we promise, we're also calling for the voters. And this book tries to enlighten the voters so that there are things that politicians should, if you can try and see whether a politician is lying or is not lying.
I like the 3 figures here. One is this orange.
Yeah.
The next one is in blue.
The first one is red.
Red, blue, and orange.
Yeah.
Why?
It depicts the quest, Zambia's quest, Zambia's different aspirations.
Okay.
So
the red?
It's the aspiration to be independent.
Okay, independence.
Yeah.
Okay. The blue?
It's an aspiration to actually have the right, to choose their own leaders. That's democracy.
Democracy, yeah. And the last one, orange?
The orange is an aspiration for economic freedom.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which
we should be wealthy and prosperous.
Yeah. So in conclusion,
yes,
I touched a bit of tourism and manufacturing, but mostly I tried to talk about the impact of patronage systems in our governance and how it helps us not to actually achieve goals, where you have people that are working in the civil service that have been put there based on the patronage system, not that they're competent enough, because qualification and competence are two different things. Because most people say, no, okay, what if he's qualified? Why not? No, that was acceptable at independence. Now it's not about just qualification. There has to be competence. So what we need to do is to put systems that ensure that we pick the best.
I know. Every time, people raise the issue of tribalism, that the president has appointed people from either a section of the region or from his tribe. People say, what's wrong if they are qualified?
That is not, that cannot apply in this time and age. It could apply after independence because there were very few people. So even people could just speak English. They say, come and work. Because they can read something. They'll even give them job like human resource manager, but they're grade 12. We used to have those, situations. Yeah. This one is what. But they're just a grade 12. That's why after independence, everyone who could read, who had a degree and what, they came on board. So it could apply to say if they are qualified, why not? In this time and age where you have a lot of people who are qualified, a lot of people who are specialized in different things, a system of picking people on merit into working in the government institutions, state-owned enterprises, government ministries, in the foreign service, is needed. Actually, for the foreign service, we have to leave it for the civil servants. We have to seal it for the civil servants. It is a motivation for those civil servants that have dedicated their life to improving the life of, the country. At some point, after you work for 12 years or something like that, you're posted with your family to go and work in a foreign service for 6 years. You just have some fresh air. The government has appreciated you. You come back, later on you retire and you're happy.
Yeah, wonderful. Dear viewers, we're hosting Mr. Andyford Mayele Banda. He's been a presidential candidate twice. He leads his own political parties. We're reviewing this beautiful book, Economic System Dismantling, Why Zambia Can Be the Model for African Transformation. It's an international book. It's been written to an international audience, but clearly impactful, and he uses Zambia as a case study. What are your last words, and where are we with your political party?
Yeah, so a lot of people say, you've been quiet. Yeah. I hope when they read this book and my contribution, I always work for the country. I think I made a decision to just focus on, my work for the country, and this is part of the work, that I'm doing as a contribution to the country to actually enlighten many people. And I believe, after writing this book, I believe there's more literature that is coming from me, in the future. So that also affected, political activities. But there's no book coming before 2026. Right now, after the book, we are going back to the structures, reviving them, preparing them, for 2026. It
struck me. Were you trying to write a revolutionary manifesto which ended up in the book?
Well, I think when I started writing, I didn't know that actually I was going to end up, writing a book that was so profound. I find it profound.
It is.
I've read this book I think even 50 times. Obviously in my
Admire
reviews,
your own work.
And and I believe that it will have an impact for a long time to come.
Yeah,
I don't have any doubt on that.
I can tell you it's a good book. The political economy discusses profound, and the interventions that you have made, the proposals that you have made, and the critical analysis you've put to all systems, and the expose of how the system has impacted our national development was also very, very key. I also love the way you put spices of history to every chapter that you put. It's good to put context. So it's a profound book, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I'll encourage people to really read the book.
Yeah.
It's not a PR exercise. He has put a lot of work to this book. And
no, it's not a PR exercise. And I'm trying to actually, because there's a lot of information that I discovered when I was researching, which I wish could be taught at a young stage, so that young people can start opening up their minds at an earlier stage. So I would encourage parents to actually buy this book for their children, to learn about the history of Africa, the history of Zambia. There's a brief history of Zambia and how our economic system has been set up. I think it's something that would actually impact the mind. And that's what we need. When we go to the elections, we should not vote for songs. We should actually start building an enlightened voter who's going to make a decision that is not just good for themselves, but for the country as well. Well,
for the politics, that is something I've discussed, why songs are very popular as campaign songs and campaign tools. Just look at the adverts. Whoever is selling detergent water, they have to sing. Even banks now are singing. The adverts are about singing. Those that sell motor vehicles are not even showcasing the power of the vehicles, but the advert is about singing. So probably we need to encourage more depth, especially by reading books, going back to the literature and reading books. Are you going to put this book in other forms? Are you going to provide an audio book? Are you going to provide a video book to attempt to reach the new audiences?
Yes, we have to put the book in new forms once all the launches have been done.
Okay.
So those are the new projects, but we don't want the new projects to actually have a lot of impact, on our political activities. I think we are running out of time for 2026.
Okay.
But the last point I talk about, I think it was under mindset dismantling. When I was writing the book, and I'm writing this book, and a lot of people were like, does the Zambian audience read?
Yeah, that question is persistent.
The issue about reading, for me, is irritating, because it seems like it is a credit, for a society not to read. Like, it's like it's a win. So I give an example. So we need to change our mindset. We need to start reading, because people think that when you get a doctorate, you get a degree and it's enough, you have qualified. Actually, to learn, we have to be inquisitive. We have to study more things that are actually outside, our
area of specialization.
And I give statistics. For example, I think that was in 2020, 63% of adults in the United States had read at least a book. 63%. So you can understand that the superiority of of people from developed countries does not just come from exploiting poor countries. It also comes from the inquisitive minds. Inquisitive minds are not just going to come by gossiping about politics. It's about studying, and I would encourage people to actually research more about the history of Africa. To read more about where we're coming from. I think that is education, in addition to this specialization that the African child needs. If they have to be set free, they have to read more about the history. So that would be my last, talking point. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Because even for me, like when I was writing and researching and I was reading a lot of materials, actually I was like amazed and getting upset. I'm like, oh my God, we've been exploited. And my mind was opening up, and I believe that, I'll never be the same person.
Yeah, wonderful. Today, we were hosting Mr. Andyford Mayele Banda. Is a leader of the people